Every IT project manager must know how to use Jira. Statistics show that about 65,000 companies use Jira as their primary tool, totaling about 8 to 9 million people. So even if you don't use Jira right now, there is a high probability that you will have it as a primary tool in the next company. That's why stay until the end of the video, because after you learn how to use Jira, I will share some critical insights and resources to help you become a world-class IT project manager. Okay, but I don't want to talk about Jira, I want to show you how to use it, and we'll start from scratch. I'll go and create a new account with you. So I'll go to Google and just search for Jira. We'll take this first result, click the Get It Free. This button, by the way, can have different names, but don't worry. And we'll land in this view. There are two cool things here to notice. First of all, Jira is free of charge for a team up to 10 users. So here's what I recommend. After watching this video, create your own account and try to click through all the features that I explain in this tutorial. The second part is that Jira is actually a bundle of projects, and this Jira software is what you think as about Jira. It's a project and issue tracking. But very often it comes in conjunction with Confluence. It's a document collaboration tool where you store all your documentation, meeting notes, and all relevant information. And there are many other supporting modules here like service management, but we won't cover it in this video. We'll focus on Jira and Confluence. That's why I'll select Confluence and click Next. Here you might have an additional step if you do it for the first time. Atlassian will send you an email where you have to confirm your email address, and after that you'll land in this view. So first thing, you need to give a name to your site, and this is a very cool feature. So Atlassian will keep your Jira instance, your Jira site on their domain for free. And you can name it as you want, unless this name is already taken. On the next step, Atlassian will set up a website for you and install Jira instance there. It will take just a minute. Sometimes Jira may ask you a few questions to learn more about you and help you to set up your first Jira project. On the next screen, you'll need to name your project. Next, you can select template, and Atlassian decided that it's recommended to use Scrum. On the next screen, Jira will ask you to integrate with other tools that you might have, for example, like Slack or Jenkins. For now, we'll just skip it. And here we are, we landed at the default screen with some tutorial. It's a blank page, and what's even more important, it's a very simplified project in Jira. And here's the biggest problem as I see it. In all tutorials, if we continue just explaining things based on this simplified setup of Jira, you will learn nothing. Because when you come to a new company in the real world, their Jira setup will be completely different and it will be more complicated. Here, I think it's worth mentioning how you get into Jira in the real world. In very rare cases, when you work in a very small company, you may set up a Jira account on your own. But in most cases, if you work for an organization that uses Jira as a primary tool, a Jira administrator will invite you to the company's Jira and they will use your corporate email for that. And usually you get an email that prompts you to set up password and get access. That's why you can use this approach I'm showing right now, where you create new account with your personal email address only for learning purposes. That's why for the purpose of this tutorial, I will switch account and will move to my another account where I set up Jira the way that real companies uses it most of the times. This way you won't be shocked when you join a new company and see that everything is different. But when you do create your own account for training purposes and you don't see all of this stuff here, just remember that you can go to project settings, then you can click the features and you can turn on most of the capabilities that I'll explain in this tutorial here. So, in Jira we work with issues or tickets. In other words, it's the primary building block or entity in Jira. There are different types of issues. So, for example, you can have tasks and subtasks, user stories, epics, and so on. Also, you can create your own issue types in Jira if you need to align it with your organization's workflows. So an issue is just this card here on your UI, and if you open it, each issue has lots of fields here. So for example, you have your title, which is just text. Then you have your description, which is a rich text editor. So you can use bold, italic, some styles here. You can add links, images, mentions, emojis, tables, code snippets, and many more information here. Then you can go to this details part, and here you will have drop downs to select people. You can have your labels, which are multiple select fields. Then you can have your numbers like user story points here, or estimates in hours. Or even more complicated fields like time tracking, where you can add some time tracking to say that you spend 1 hour on this task. Likewise, you may have fields like date pickers, where you can select date or date and time. Also, you can link issues with each other, either as parent and child, or as related, or to show that one issue blocks another. We'll cover it later. On top of that, you have your attachment. So if you click attach, you can usually attach any file that you want. For example, you can put here mockups, designs, any diagrams or documents that developers can refer to. Last but not least, you have your command section. So each issue has related commands to it. And again, it's a rich text editor. You can do a lot of cool things here. So here's what I want you to remember, that there are different issue types like user story tasks and subtasks, epics, and each of them may have different set of fields and even composition and layout of these fields. Likewise, in general, you can customize everything here. You can have a different set of fields. You can compose them in different way. You can put some fields in detail, some in more fields, some in this general section. So when you come to a real-life company and you will see that it's completely different, that's totally okay, because they just customized it. But at the end of the day, it's just Jira. However, here's what I want you to remember. Jira has many different features, but essentially, Jira simply shows you issues in different groups and representations. That's why it's critical to understand what fields from an issue Jira uses for different features. And let me demonstrate it to you while we familiarize ourselves with this Jira user interface. And we'll start with the project sidebar located on the screen's left side. It's tailored to provide quick access to project-specific information, including project details, project settings, and the project's issue tracker. And first we have the roadmap section, which provides a high-level view of the project goals and milestones. Additionally, you can rapidly create epics here with minimal required information. As a result, it gives you a Gantt chart view of your development roadmap. But if you think about it, Jira filters epics in your project and visualizes their start and due date. Plus, this dependency line creates a link between two epics. So you can see all this information inside each issue. The backlog section allows you to prioritize work items and plan sprints based on your team's capacity and goals. But again, Jira uses and adjusts information inside an issue. So if, for example, you assign a user story to a sprint, Jira will add the sprint name in the corresponding field. The backlog looks slightly different if you use Kanban, but the main functionality stays the same. The difference is that Kanban backlog mainly relies on status of an issue instead of the sprint. Then we have the active sprint that will give you a different view of the sprint backlog. It's just as if you have a physical Scrum board in your office. Here you can drag and drop issues, but essentially Jira just changes their statuses. Okay, I'll skip report section for now, we'll get back to it in just a few minutes. Next we have the issues section, which provides access to all projects' issues, even hidden ones, and that's important. Here you have many tools to find, group and filter required issues based on all their fields. So, for example, you may need a list of all epics with priority higher than normal. Then you need to select an issue type and find the corresponding filter for priority. And just like that, I have created a simple query. You need to remember this word, query. You'll hear a lot about it in Jira. A query is your request for information on Jira's database of issues. You tell Jira to show you all the issues based on the parameters you provide. So we can use these predefined drop-downs to select the required fields we want to use in our query. However, it's just to make your life easier. It's called a quick search. But under the hood, Jira has a Jira query language. It's a super simple programming language, and what's more important, it's human readable. So, for example, if you want to find all epics with priority high or highest, the query will look like this. Issue type equals to epic and priority in high, highest and project gcalc. That's just the short name of our project. This knowledge is for advanced users, but when you become a senior IT project manager, you do need to know this stuff. But before that, you may suffice with quick searches only. Anyways, why do we need these queries and query language? The main idea is that Jira has a limited number of predefined views for issues that you see on the user interface. But often you will need to customize the set of issues based on specific parameters. And after that, here are just a few use cases to use your custom set of issues or your query. First, you can make a bulk change of fields for the selected issues. For example, you need to add a label field to all epics with high priority. Second, your query is dynamic. Every time you run the query, it will give you the updated list of issues. For example, you want to see a list of issues created yesterday to review and prioritize them. Third, you can query issues created after a specific date or within a range of dates. For example, it can give you a list of defects created during a week, so it's the basis for many different reports. Fourth, you can save the query as a filter, and then you can easily access filters here at the top. So it allows you to monitor selected issues with just 2 clicks away. Fifth, you can use saved filters in different pre-built reports and dashboards. We'll review them later in the video, but once again, they allow you to visualize issues and their attributes in a different way. Overall, learning Jira's query language is an excellent investment of your time, but now we need to pause because there are several critical takeaways from what you have learned so far. Let's go discuss them. Okay, just needed some coffee to continue this conversation. You see, Jira is just a tool to visualize your issues based on fields and parameters that they have. So, to become a better Jira user, you need to learn what those fields mean and how Jira uses them. That leads us to a more important second takeaway. Your Jira and your project are as good as the data inside your issues. If your issues do not contain the required information or are inaccurate, Jira will give you a misleading information. As you know, garbage in, garbage out. So, if you want Jira to be useful, you must maintain strict information hygiene in the issues. And likewise, you need to ensure that you collect only the required information in those issues. So often, IT project managers overload Jira with fields that don't add value to the project management approach and the team. Okay, keep this in mind because it's critical for the rest of our Jira overview. Let's get back. Alright, next in the sidebar we have components. This section allows you to create subgroups of your issues. It's just a custom text field. But in practice we can use components to group tickets that relate to one module or functionality of our product. For example, login screen, in-app purchases, database, and so on. Also, you can automate some processes with these components, like assigning a responsible person. It's also a way to point to the subject matter expert of this module. For example, the primary use case is that you can fill out the component field, and then the ticket is automatically assigned to a tech or a group lead. And this person, this tech lead, reassigns these tickets to other team members in their sub-team based on their knowledge. It's a basic delegation routine that saves lots of time in the long term and removes you as a bottleneck. And now with all this knowledge we can return to the reports section. So here you can find some built-in reports. Some of them will use just one field and show you some kind of chart. Other reports will require a saved filter based on your query. These reports can give you the necessary insights to make correct decisions about your project. But unfortunately there is no universal piece of advice here. You must play with these reports to understand what you can present to your project stakeholders. The only recommendation here is to actually use these reports and Jira dashboards. You should avoid manually extracting data from Jira to provide a high-level progress report as much as possible. Let's move on. Here we have the development section of the sidebar. In the code section, you can link Jira to your code repository. And after you connect those, you will see all pull requests here. Moreover, your Jira issues will have an additional link leading to the corresponding pull request in the repository. But it's beyond the scope of this video, you can research this topic on your own. However, you should not be responsible for setting this up. Your engineers should do this. Next we have the releases, and I need to deviate a bit to explain this concept. In the ideal and very simple IT project, you implement and test your product in a development environment. Then, once in a while, you release it into the market or so-called production environment. But in the real world, we develop products in multiple environments. Most commonly, we have development environment. That's where all developers in the team work on the code. This environment is rapidly changing because everyone changes the code at will. Then we test the dev environment and promote code to the staging environment. The staging environment is used for a stable version of the code that ideally doesn't contain obvious defects. Therefore, once we put a new piece of functionality to staging, we will only promote selected fixes to this functionality for some time. This way we keep staging environment stable until we develop another big piece of functionality to promote, and we use this version to present to customers and other stakeholders. The production environment is the environment where real end users have direct access to the product. For example, Apple App Store is the production environment for all iOS apps. And again, we promote a stable version of our product that we've thoroughly tested from staging to production. And the main idea is that you make fewer changes as you go to the higher environments, so essentially you start bundling them. Also, you control more and more of what changes you make. Ideally, the product's quality improves as you progress through the environments. But there might be even more environments, for example, integration and quality assurance environments. Okay, that's the theory of quality and change management. But now you need to reflect it inside your Jira project. There might be different approaches to representing it in Jira. For example, issues and related code get to the staging environment following the Jira workflow on the board. But to get to the production environment, you group all issues into Jira release and release them as a package. This is a fundamental approach to version control of a software product. It allows you to ensure your new code is tested and won't break your production environment. Moreover, you control what functionality and pieces of code go to production. And finally, you incrementally add new features and capabilities to your product. So as you see, this Jira functionality is closely related to the development practices inside your organization. And every company has a unique approach on how to set this up. But for the sake of this tutorial, remember that when you make a release, tickets disappear from your board and backlog. But you can still see them in your release section and you can query them in the issue section. Okay, in the release section of Jira you can create releases and you have two approaches here. First, you can plan the release, so you can assign issues to a release, and it will mean that once you implement all the planned issues, then you will release this code to a high environment. By the way, you can do it quickly in the backlog section. I'll show you later how to do it. And also you can edit a field in an issue which is called fix for version. The second approach is to release everything that you currently have in the done state. So, for example, you want to promote all the finished work from your current sprint. But one more time, in this release section, Jira just groups issues by one field. All the rest is bells and whistles that help you organize the information. However, on an advanced level, you can link Jira with developers' tools and automate many processes with this release functionality. So, for example, when you click the release button, Jira will automatically create a new version of your application, it will run some automated tests and then move it to the staging environment, and maybe send an email to your testers that it's ready, and so on and on. So ask your developers about these capabilities. On a long-term project, it may save hundreds of hours for your developers. Now I want to ask you to click the like button if you learned something new or valuable from this part of the video. It will indicate that you want more information like this. So please click the like button now and let's continue. Okay, the project pages section allows you to connect pages from Confluence and give you quick access to your documentation. For example, you can link to the detailed requirements for features and user stories or to the stakeholder register. On the other hand, the Add a Shortcut allows you to create a new button on this sidebar and link to any other resource for quick access. For example, links to staging and production environments. The project settings section provides access to project-specific settings, including permissions, notifications, workflows, and more. You can customize every aspect of Jira if you have permissions. But here's the next problem. All of these may look different for you based on the type of Jira project that you work with. So let's create a new project now and I'll explain what I mean. So you need to click on the project drop-down in the navigation bar and click the Create Project button. And here's the first critical point. Jira is built around Scrum and Kanban frameworks, so you must know these frameworks, how they work, and the prescribed artifacts and events. Why? Because Jira is just a sophisticated tool to visualize your work. It does what you ask it to do. So if you don't understand how agile frameworks or your project management approach work, Jira will not substitute this knowledge. Unfortunately, agile frameworks are beyond the scope of this video. However, stay until the end because I'll point you to the valuable resources that will help you learn all aspects of project management, including Scrum and Kanban. Alright, as you can see, there are many templates that will help you set up Jira to your needs. Depending on your choice, Jira may add more issue types or customize the board or the workflow. Also, some templates require additional Jira modules like Jira Product Discovery or Service Management. We will use Scrum because it's the most common project template that an IT project manager will use. And when you select a framework, Jira will show you the key features, for example, issue types that you will get and the workflow statuses. Again, it's just a starting point, you can customize everything later, so click the Use Template button. And here's the second critical point. Jira has two types of projects: team managed and company managed. In most cases, you will work with company managed projects. And if you are watching this video, it means that you will not have permissions to customize most of the Jira settings. In company-managed projects, Jira administrator sets up all the projects and does the customization. And admin is just a type of user inside Jira with all the permissions and advanced skills in Jira. That's why, if you need to adjust something in your project, you will reach out to that person. It's important because many new IT project managers are afraid that they need to set up Jira from scratch. But in the real world, it's not true. You will use an established approach to using Jira and you won't have the ability to change or break too much. And essentially, it's the most significant difference between these project types. Additionally, team-managed projects have fewer customization options, but on the other hand, they allow you to start a project with little Jira experience. That's why we'll choose a company-managed project. Then I'll show you the capabilities so that you can request them from the project administrator. Okay, here we need to give a name to the project. We'll keep this checkbox to connect Confluence and the repositories. We can connect all the tools to our new project on the next screen. And I'll create a new space in Confluence, but I'll leave repositories to developers. Now click the button and we are done. But again, even creating a new project may be limited to Jira administrators. In any case, what should you do when you get a blank new Jira project? Here's the checklist for you. First, check that all team members have access to the project. The easiest way to do that is to give them a link. If someone doesn't have access, ask Jira administrator to add people to the project. Second, you need to check the Jira board setting. You should check your board's workflow, statuses, and columns. If your company uses simplified workflow, you can add statuses and columns to your project board yourself, and Jira will create those workflows for you. It is called simplified workflow because you can move issues from any status to any other status. However, sometimes companies develop a more sophisticated workflow. For example, you can only move an issue to the done status if its previous status was in testing. So you won't be able to move an issue from in progress to the done at once. So administrators can create very sophisticated workflows in the Jira settings. Moreover, you can have different workflows for different issue types. Thankfully, the user interface is very intuitive here. You can add statuses and transitions, you can drag and drop them, or link statuses with each other just on this diagram. Anyways, we are moving to the third step in a new Jira project, and it is to set up your components, releases, and assign an engineer to connect Jira with code repositories. Whew. That's enough for an overview. Now let's switch gears and dive deeper into the most critical aspect of Jira. I have empathized a lot on fields and parameters of an issue. So let me walk you through the main fields that you need to know to use Jira efficiently. When you click the Create button, this dialog appears and it contains many stuff here. This screen is highly customizable, so it may look different in your organization. First, you see the project drop-down. If you work in a big organization, hundreds of projects might be listed here. By default, Jira creates an issue in the project you are currently working in. However, it's worth double-checking that you create a ticket in the right place. Next, you can select an issue type. Based on the type, this screen will have different fields. For example, epics have this epic name field. Instead, a user story has a link to epic. There might be many more differences here. You, or rather Jira administrator, can customize fields and their location for each issue type. Then we have the status dropdown, and by default it will be the first status in the process. However, you may choose to create an issue that is in progress right away. Next we have summary. It's the title of your issue. Quite often, different issue types have a specific format for titles. For example, in Scrum, epics and user stories often follow the following formula. As a user group, I want objective or action so that I overcome a problem. For example, as a groups player, I want to be able to cancel a subscription so that I can opt out at any moment. On the other hand, tasks and subtasks may have different format that simply describes the required work. In the description field, you describe what this issue is all about. For example, you can explain what work needs to be done, what are the acceptance criteria, well, everything that a team member might need. It's a rich text editor, so you can add formatting to the text. You can add inline images, tables, links, emojis and code snippets. So most often you put your requirements here and you can use whatever format works in your organization. Again, components dropdown allows you to group issues by the module or functionality of your product. In this case, it will be in-app purchase component. The attachments area allows you to add files to the issue. Usually you add wireframes or mockups of your product, some additional documentation, maybe a video explanation and so on. The reporter field shows who created this issue. In most cases, it's you. However, imagine that a customer asked for an improvement. Then you create a ticket on behalf of that person. It will indicate the stakeholder who requested information. Next we have the linked issues section, and unfortunately these fields are often overlooked. However, it's the basic integration of project information. Here are some use cases. You can link to a ticket that blocks you to show that there is a dependency, or you can link two issues as duplication, which will justify closing one of them without doing any work. Likewise, you can link related issues that will indicate that you can find additional information in that second issue. But keep in mind that you must communicate with the team on how and when to use these links. This is because every company uses them differently. Fixed versions is the field to indicate which Jira release this ticket will get into. We have discussed this functionality already. The assignee field shows the person responsible for doing the work required by this field, arguably one of the most critical fields. Next, you can set the priority of the issue. Again, there are predefined options here. First, however, you need to discuss it with the team and stakeholders to ensure that you understand them in the same way. Labels field is another way to help you group tickets, and usually labels are visible in many places in Jira, for example like on the board. And I have already explained the epic link. Here you can choose the parent epic for the issue. In the sprint field, you can indicate in which sprint you plan to do this ticket. If you leave it blank, the issue will go into the backlog. Last but not least, there are two useful features that you need to know about. First, you can check this box, and once you click the Create button, Jira will create the issue and open a new dialog box for the next ticket. But what's more important, it will pre-fill all the fields with the same values as the previous issue. It will save lots of time and effort for you to rapidly create issues. Second, at the top of the dialog there is this I button. And if you enable it, you will watch this issue. And in practice, you will get notifications and emails about all changes to this issue. So in practice, you can track progress on the most critical issues. So for example, if someone asks a question in a comment, you'll know about it at once. And here's another critical thing you need to keep in mind. When you create an issue, you may not see all its fields. But when you edit the existing issue, they do appear. Moreover, the layout is a bit different. The idea here is that, for example, you should not estimate issues immediately. Instead, you do it later. And in general, if there is no logic to fill out a field during its creation, you won't see it. And by the way, after you create an issue, the comments section appear. It's important to know that you can mention people in the comments. These people will get a notification to check the comment even if they don't follow this issue. And one more time, you can search and query Jira tickets by all these fields. Moreover, there is more information that meets the eye. For example, you can search for issues updated on a specific date, or tickets that have comments, or tickets that have no information in a given field. Okay, and now I want to discourage you from digging too deep into Jira administration and customization. I will show you the capabilities that Jira admin sees and that you can ask for. But likewise, I want you to notice how complex Jira can be. So, as an administrator of this Jira, I have access to this Configure button. When I click it, I get into the Jira settings. I can add, remove and rearrange the fields in the Issue Details screen in this Layout section. Do notice that it's a project level, so I have some options already available here. But let's imagine that you want to have a separate text field for acceptance criteria in user stories. Then a Jira administrator can go to Jira settings for issues. At a glance, there are tons of things that you can do here just with issues. So in our case, we need to add a custom field. I'll go to the corresponding section and click the Create Custom Field button. Then I'll choose a type, and we need a paragraph of text. By the way, do notice how many options we have here. Then we'll name this new field, and next we can specify in what screen, or in other words, in what project this new field appears. After that, we need to go to the project level and ensure that this new field appears in the right place, and if not, we can rearrange the order. Okay, here's what I want you to know. As a Jira administrator, you set this up for all projects in the organization. So you have the option to customize one project or all projects at once. If you customize all projects, you'll end up with issues bloated with dozens of fields that just one or the other team uses. If you choose to do customization per project, you add a layer of complexity to Jira configuration that you need to manage. You see, if you are watching this video, you are a basic user. After a year or two of real-life usage of Jira, you'll become an advanced user. Then you can add to your practical knowledge some Jira administrative knowledge. That's a natural progression I recommend, so don't waste time learning all these customization options from start. Instead, focus on becoming an advanced user of Jira that your organization already has. However, if for example you must be a proficient Jira administrator to get your next dream job, you can take one of the Atlassian's learning paths. It would take dozens of hours of online courses and several $100s for you to complete. But I repeat it, you don't need this depth of knowledge. To run an IT project, you need advanced user skills, not Jira administrator skills. Alright, that's why let's focus on things that you really need to know how to use. And the most crucial area of Jira is the backlog section. Here we need to step back for a second to understand the issue types. And issue types in Jira follow the agile best practices. So if you use Scrum, by default the top level of the organization is epic. Next you break down epics into user stories. Next you can break down user stories into tasks and subtasks. This is the intended hierarchy in Jira. In Kanban the idea is the same, but you have only epics, tasks and subtasks. At the same time, each issue type can live on its own. So for example, you can have only user stories in Scrum or only tasks in Kanban. So all other issue types just help you to organize your work in a better way. Now, here's a critical concept you need to understand. Backlog view is designed for a rapid creation of issues. To create an issue here, you just need to type in the summary or the title of the issue, and then you can drag and drop it easily around to add more values to different fields. But first things first, when you start a project from scratch, there are many ways to organize your backlog. For example, if you follow an agile project management approach, start with epics. You may already have a project charter, requirements traceability metrics, or just some notes from initial meetings with customers. That's why you have an opportunity to organize stakeholder requirements into epics. This is an excellent example of project integration because you move stakeholder requirements as is into a project management tool. On the other hand, if you work in a purely agile environment, your project starts with Sprint Zero or some grooming session with the product owner. In this case, you should rapidly create user stories in the backlog with just titles. Then later you can organize them into epics. In any case, after that you'll have a sprint planning session where you will fill out all the user story details. Here's another critical part. This backlog section is prioritized list of user stories. It means that the most important user stories are at the top of the list. It also means that user stories at the top should have more details than those lower down the list. And you're responsible for collaborating with product owners to set priorities and identify requirements for these user stories at the top. So, how many user stories should you have detailed at the top? Their answer is as many as you can take into the next sprint. The Scrum framework has two main approaches here. First, you can have grooming meetings during your sprint. This allows you to prepare for the next sprint planning session in advance. I recommend this approach if you develop a product with complicated business logic that requires detailed acceptance criteria or specifications. The second approach, you do it all during sprint plannings. So at the start of the sprint, you review the top priority user stories and estimate them. You may also decide that you can spend some time writing acceptance criteria during the first few days of the sprint, which will save you time during sprint planning. In any case, when you get to a sprint planning session, first you need to create a sprint. Click the Create Sprint button. Then add dates to the sprint, set the duration and start dates. It's also important to describe the goal of the sprint. You can also link pages from Confluence. By the way, that's a common misconception. In Scrum and Kanban, you can and should have documentation. So it can be specifications, user interface designs, related documentation, and so on. You should not try to fit everything into a user story description, and often you can link to the required sources of information. Then you start filling out your sprint until your total estimate is close to your team's velocity. Again, this video is about how to use Jira. It's not going to explain all the theory behind Scrum framework, but I do cover it in my Practical Project Management online course, and I'll tell you about it a bit later. So how do you technically fill in your sprint backlog? You can drag and drop items one by one, or you can drag this line to include multiple user stories. Also keep in mind that you can plan multiple sprints in advance. Just click the Create Sprint button and Jira will populate the dates for you. But remember that Scrum never stops and sprints go one after another. That's why you must ensure that you can fit all the required Scrum meetings in one sprint. And your sprint backlog and Jira doesn't show these meetings. Okay, sooner or later you will need to start organizing your backlog. That's why you need to create epics and link user stories to epics. Again, you can do it right from the backlog. Click the Create Epic button, fill out the summary and epic name fields, and you are done. Next, you can drag and drop user stories into epics. They will link up automatically. Do notice that epic name appears on the user story. Likewise, you can open an epic and start creating user stories right inside of it. The outcome is the same, your issues are linked now, and again, you can filter and group them in the backlog. By the way, in the same way you can organize releases. Create a release here. For example, we'll release everything that we will implement in sprints 1, 2, and 3. Then you can drag and drop the user stories to your release and they will link up automatically. Okay, congratulations! The last step in the backlog is to start the sprint. So, click the button, check the information and start the sprint. But remember that Jira will start tracking your progress after you begin the sprint. And in Scrum, you'll have your burn down chart. That's why if you change estimates or remove or add user stories, it will affect your reporting. And overall it may screw with your team's velocity. And there is one more critical concept about Jira that you need to understand. Let's go to the sprint backlog. You see, most of the teams do break down their user stories into tasks. Moreover, they estimate their tasks in hours, which, as you understand, is not prescribed by Scrum. And you may need to estimate in hours, not just story points, for many reasons. First, you may need a better control over the progress. Second, you need to address the Parkinson law. Third, you may need to report to customers in hours for billing purposes. So you may ask, so why is it so important? As you can see, Jira has many features that you need in the real world. It's not just Scrum or Kanban in vacuum. This functionality here exists because you need it in the real world. And in fact, it creates several problems for you. First, as I said already, Jira does what you ask it to do. That's why you need to know Scrum and Kanban, because Jira is tailored to these agile frameworks. But second, Jira is just one tool in your whole project management approach. Other aspects like stakeholder and risk management, cost and time management, hiring, and overall project management happen outside of Jira. So now you can try and Google all these processes, tools and techniques on YouTube, and then you need to invent a way to make them work together and transform it into issues in Jira. That's why let me ask you this. Do you want me to explain all aspects of project management, including Scrum and Kanban, in all the details? I'm asking because you watched this long video even though you are extremely busy for a reason. So maybe you want to become an IT project manager and you don't know what knowledge and skills are essential in the IT industry. Perhaps you are already a project manager, but you may feel the need to understand all the aspects of project management and how to apply them in practical scenarios with tools like Jira. Or you may already know that certifications like PMP or Prince2 may not be enough to take your project management skills from good to great. You may need to explore additional resources for assistance in becoming a top-tier leader, or finding practical solutions to workplace challenges that you see in the real world. In any case, as I see it, you have two options here. Option number one, you try to Google bits and pieces of project management and you are in the same place next year with lots of wasted efforts and no further promotion. And option number two, you 100% commit to mastering practical project management framework in the next 30 days using my proven approach. And you are going to make this decision right now. That's why I'm so excited to let you know that my Practical Project Management online course is exactly what you need. I've used my 12 years of experience as an IT project manager and created a framework anyone can use in the real world. As a result, you can get a comprehensive course on IT project management with about 15 hours of educational videos. It contains everything you need to know about IT project management for the rest of your career. The best thing about this course is that you get lifetime access. It means you can learn at your own pace, but more importantly, you can return to it whenever you need to refresh your knowledge, because your career will get a serious boost. You will start running more significant, more complex projects. And you might be thinking right now, okay, Dmitro, that's a unique course that comes from practical experience, it should be super expensive. And I might have charged you $1,000. The program is that good and hundreds of students already proved it. There is a lot of value that you don't get in any other online courses. But I'm passionate about my profession. I believe that if I train you, there'll be one more great leader in the world. So I made it as affordable as possible. That's why go check the details of the course and what's included. Then compare it with the price tag, and your decision should be a non-brainer. Go get the course today. Otherwise, you can try to get through it on your own and spend another few years. Or you can grasp the practical project management framework in the next month and focus on becoming a top-tier project manager. Get the course, I'll see you there.